Hi there, and thanks for joining us on Chicago Tonight, Black Voices. I'm Brandis Friedman. On the show tonight, it's time to celebrate the dads in our lives. We'll hear from local organizations on how they're working to support and uplift Black fathers. An exhibit at the DuSable Museum seeks to educate children about the life and legacy of Emmett Till. DePaul professor and author Francesca Royster on creating a family as a queer Black woman. Local artist Dwight White went from the gridiron to the gallery. We'll see how he uses his art to celebrate Black culture.
To not understand our history is to miss out on what America is today.
And a TikTok historian on how he says Black history saved his life. All that coming up. But our first story tonight, celebrating Black fatherhood, right after this.
Chicago Tonight, Black Voices is made possible in part by Fifth Third Bank and by the support of these donors.
At Fifth Third, we believe when diverse voices are heard and empowered, communities are made stronger, lives are made better, and the future holds greater promise for all. That's why we're proud to support Chicago Tonight Black Voices. Together, we can make a difference. Together, we can drive change.
In 1965, U.S. Assistant Secretary of Labor Daniel Patrick Moynihan published a report claiming that increasing rates of, quote, out-of-wedlock births among Black families were to blame for social problems in Black communities. That report, which has been the subject of significant criticism, gave rise to persistent negative portrayals of Black fathers as absent and uninvolved in their children's lives. This despite the fact that studies in recent years have found that Black fathers are actually more likely than fathers of other races to provide daily care for their kids. That's why our next guests say that support, mentorship, and recognition for the fathers in our lives is critically important, not only for dads themselves, but for the children they're raising. Please welcome Sheldon Smith, Executive Director of the Dovetail Project, Joseph Williams, Executive Director of Mr. Dad's Fathers Club, and Rael Jackson, President and Program Manager of Real Men Cook. Welcome, gentlemen. Happy early Father's Day. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
Sheldon, I saw all of you nodding your heads, too, during that intro. Sheldon, let's start with you, please. The Dovetail Project offers a 12-week fatherhood mentorship program for fathers ages 17 to 24. Tell us more about how you mentor these young dads.
So the Dovetail Project as an initiative goes across the city of Chicago with our outreach team to recruit these fathers, and we teach them three critical things: parenting skills, life skills, and something that we call felony street law. And when the fathers complete the program, they receive a job, a GED, or a trade, along with the $500 stipend. And so we're excited because we've just celebrated our 25th graduation ceremony where 32 young men had a chance to walk across the stage.
Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Quickly, felony street law. I want to touch on why that's important.
Felony street law is important because as a dad, you just don't have to worry about the criminal justice system. You have to worry about the family law system as well. And so when it comes to paternity rights and fathers wanting to have custody of their children or even avoiding child support, they have to know those rights because they can lose their license or be incarcerated too as well.
Joseph, you saw a need in the community for dads to be more present in their children's schools. Why do you believe that's important?
Yeah, I thought it was extremely important because I grew up and I didn't have that opportunity to really have my father involved in my life. So now, being where I'm at now with a wife and 6 beautiful children,
6 kids.
I thought it was extremely important. I mean, when the father is involved, children not only less likely to go to jail and less likely to probably drop out of school, but we encourage them more to now become something and really boost their confidence. So even with our programming, we're having fathers come in on a weekly basis to read books to children to boost their confidence and self-esteem. We're working with our youth when we're mentoring them and doing one-on-one group support and teaching them about civic engagement, bullying, and all of those great things. And recently, within the last 3 years, we now host fatherhood sessions where we actually mentor fathers and help build them as they become great leaders.
Rael, today your organization, Real Men Charities, has a broad mission of community wellness. Food wellness is where you started. How do you use food and cooking to reach the community?
Well, starting off is Real Men Cook will be celebrating 34 years as a Father's Day tradition. And before Real Men Cook, most Father's Day things were about jokes, sock jokes, dad jokes, but we have made Father's Day meaningful where all over Chicago you see people cooking, barbecuing, picnics. People are coming together on Father's Day, and that's what we really wanted to do, is uplift the men that are making a difference in their communities, not just the fathers, but the father figures, the coaches, the teachers that are involved in the lives. So food has always been the hook, because food, when men cook, it's more out of love as opposed to utilitarian. And so that love is shown to the community and through the community by uplifting these men in our community. So.
Sheldon, moms often get a lot of the attention, right? You know, there are books and groups and podcasts and all sorts of ways we talk about motherhood. But why do you think dads, and black dads in particular, historically haven't gotten that same kind of support and treatment?
Well, I think when we think about fathers in general, it's not the soft and fuzzy thing, right? And with that, when you are a man and a father, you have no room to make excuses or blames. And so to that, when dads and fathers are struggling, we call it failure, but it's not. It's a parent that's struggling like a mom. If she was struggling, she would just be a struggling mom. And so I just think it's the way that people look at dads, fathers, and men in general when it comes to responsibility.
Joseph, you know, for young fathers that you work with, what are some of the challenges that they tell you that they're experiencing?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think for us, a lot of our fathers just don't know some of the resources that exist, right? They don't know that they can go to the zoo for free sometime, or they can go to your local library and pick up a Wi-Fi pass and get out. A lot of these fathers really are involved, but they need to know, how can they connect? When they go to those schools, how are those doors looking, being open, and actually letting fathers in to do those father and daughter dances and things like that? But also, I would say on the legal aspect of it, fathers really need help with that coaching on how do you go and get visitation? How do you get involved with your children?
What do you think schools can do to better support and welcome dads who might want to be involved?
Absolutely. I think schools will have to have more events that is more fatherly events, right? Like, I know we used to do a father's carnival at Beasley, so we need to have more events that embraces fathers to come into those spaces, no matter if it's a movie night, a father and daughter dance, even inviting them more to be a part of the local school councils and the PACs, really having fathers be involved in the children's education.
Rael, who are some of your inspirations for fatherhood?
Well, my bonus father, Kofi Moyo, who is the founder of Real Man Cook, he was a Renaissance man, and he had 8 children, and most of them were in Cincinnati, and he would go visit the children twice a month. So he would take that car trip to Cincinnati twice a month, which is a 5-hour ride one way and 5-hour ride back. And so he proved that men really want to be with their children, and he stood up. And not only that, he was he reads books, and that encouraged me to read. And I feel like literacy is one of the most important things about moving forward as a people. So.
Bonus father, tell me a little bit more about that, because we talk about the family that we make. We're going to be talking about that in the next segment as well.
Well, STEP really has no kind of benefit as far as what it represents. So bonus, he's a bonus in my life just because he came in at 12. When I was 12 years old, he became a bonus. And I also had my biological father in my life, who I saw, very often. Just like they said, men are more involved in the lives of their children. So I was always with my father, but I also had a bonus father to show me some other aspects of life.
Sheldon, what are some of, when I was in that intro, we talked about like the report that Daniel Patrick Moynihan wrote all those years ago, but what are some of the negative perceptions and the misconceptions about dads and their relationship with their kids?
I think the biggest misconception is that fathers don't want to be involved in their children's life. What we see from many of our young men who volunteer to sign up for our program to get that help and support, they really feel like support for dads is like a unicorn. And so I think that is the main part.
Joseph, same question that I asked to Rael. What are some of your inspirations for fatherhood? Who inspires you?
Yeah, well, of course, I will always say my grandfather, because he really instilled in me the importance of giving back. But honestly, I have to give it back over to my family and my wife and children, because my children helped me be a better father, a better man. Just looking at them every day made me want to do something different to make a difference in my life, but also others.
Kids really do tell you what kind of parents they need, right? You don't really have a choice.
Absolutely.
All right, I'll have to leave it there. Again, happy early Father's Day to the three of you, Sheldon Smith, Joseph Williams, and Rael Jackson. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
And all 3 organizations have Father's Day celebrations coming up. You can visit our website for more details. Up next, a local TikToker teaches the importance of Black history. Since Juneteenth was made a federal holiday in 2021, it's become a time to re-examine the way our children are taught about Black history and reckoning with the ways structural racism has stifled and suppressed teaching Black history in our schools. TikTok creator Ernest Krim III says for him, exploring and creating Black history content has become more than an intellectual pursuit. It's also helped him heal from encountering racism in his own life. Producer Erica Gunderson has this story.
How many of you all know what stepping is? That was actually founded by Black Greeks. When I go in, I'm coming in high energy. I bring my drums because I'm telling a story. There was a period in time in which we used drums for liberation, and because of that, they were made illegal.
In his 12 years as a history teacher, Ernest Krim III used teaching Black history as a way to not just educate his students, but affirm them. He says learning Black history saved his life, and now, through anti-racism workshops and on TikTok, he wants to do the same for others.
All right, who's going first, though? I'm from the south side of Chicago, West Pullman neighborhood. I went to Morgan Park High School, then I went down to U of I in Champaign, and I said, you know what, I never got a chance to take a Black history course, and I absolutely fell in love with it. And it became the driving force for me getting my grades up and graduating. I was learning so much information. To me, it was like shedding light on the issues in Chicago for the Black community. When we were forced over here, there was a period of enslavement. The Great Migration. Oh, okay, segregation, redlining. That's what I'm in. And with this knowledge, I can use it proactively. So what if I was able to give this same information to the people of my community? And to me, it was a thing that would be used for our liberation, mentally and physically.
What's up, y'all? It's Mr. Ernest Krim III.
Krim's path to becoming a content creator on social media began in part due to a 2016 incident when he and his wife were verbally and physically attacked by a white woman at a festival.
She began to yell at us and call us the N-word because we grabbed the bag, and she eventually spat on us.
Krim posted video of the incident to social media, and the woman was identified and later convicted of battery. He says the experience inspired him to use social media for anti-racism and Black history content.
I decided to make a TikTok because I knew that's where all my kids were. All my students were on there, and it took off.
Krim's TikToks range from stories of historical figures to contextualizing current events.
Whenever she saw a slave catcher in action, she pulled out that thing, that knife and that boiling water. When you talk about Buffalo, New York, don't forget to mention that Buffalo was an epicenter for Black liberation during slavery.
Judging by his more than 375,000 followers, his content is striking a chord. Standing beside the monument to the Great Migration in Bronzeville, Krim reflects on the importance of seeing Black stories prominently depicted in American history.
This is where my family's story starts in recent history. My family on both sides came to Chicago on the south side in the 1950s.
And by making Black history more visible to all, Krim says he's doing his part to help correct the American record.
One of the most important things about my story is wanting people to understand that education is going to start with us first and foremost. You know, implicitly we understand that when we say U.S. or American, we're starting from a Eurocentric narrative. And oftentimes because of that, our stories are added as a footnote as opposed to being taught in conjunction because we've been here before this country was a nation. So it's like to not understand our history is to miss out on what America is today.
For Chicago Tonight, Black Voices, this is Erica Gunderson.
And you can find Ernest Krim III on, you guessed it, TikTok as Mr. Krim 3. A touring exhibit now at the DuSable Museum of African American History is aimed at helping children understand the tragedy and legacy of Emmett Till's life. Through photographs and artifacts, the exhibit shows how young Till's lynching and his mother's subsequent actions fueled the civil rights movement and how the events still ripple through America today.
We are so happy to welcome this exhibit from the Indianapolis Children's Museum. Most Chicagoans know the story of Emmett Till, but I think this is the very first time that the story has been packaged for younger viewers. sort of high level about this child who was murdered and what happened after that, and really the impact of Emmett's murder on the civil rights movement, and what we can do today to try to make good history going forward, right? These are stories, similar to the stories that you'll find for children up at the Illinois Holocaust Museum and Education Center. We have to understand at a young age, what is the result of hatred, of racial hatred? If we're ever going to learn how to act differently and treat each other differently, then we have to understand our history and where we come from. These stories of courage and deep impact are always important to tell. And even though it's 50 years later after his murder, is still relevant, and we can still learn from it and hopefully do things better in the future.
Emmett Till and Mamie Till Mobley, Let the World See, is at the DuSable Museum through July 16th. You'll find more on that on our website. In her new book, Francesca Royster describes the moment she knew she wanted to be a mother as a transcendent experience, watching a mother holding her sleeping child on an airplane. But the DePaul University professor's path to holding her own child as a queer black woman in her 40s was a little bumpier than that beautiful moment. In this month's Black Voices Book Club selection, Royster relates her experience of becoming a mother through a lens of her own family's history. The book is called Choosing Family, a memoir of queer motherhood and black resistance. And of course, author Francesca Royster joins us now. Thank you.
Thank you, Brenda.
So the idea of chosen family, it's one that is, of course, familiar to many LGBTQ people in the community, and you trace your own family's history to demonstrate that it's a way many black families have come together over the years. Tell us a little bit about your grandmother, Celie, in particular.
Sure. Well, it turns out she was my great-grandmother. She was someone who came up from Louisiana, from New Orleans with her mother, and ended up really running a boarding house in Bronzeville in the 1930s and 40s, and actually up until the 60s. And I'm really interested in that idea of chosen family as one that is about connections, about making a way out of no way, about playing to your strengths and making home with the people who need it. And so that boarding house was sometimes with strangers or near strangers or distant relatives, or sometimes actually with my own mother. So it was a way of opening up home across different kinds of relationships.
Because to that point, you use the word queer to describe the family that you were raised in, even though it was, what we consider a nuclear family with a father, a mother, 2 children. What do you mean when you call it queer?
Well, I think about the ways that both of my parents had a strong network of friends who came in and really helped out in times of crisis. My mom in particular really leaned hard on her female friends, and so we have long time kind of play aunties and uncles and people who have been a part of our lives, who followed us, my sister and I, as we've grown. And I think that's really important. And also, thinking about both of my parents in terms of how important their friendships are and community connections have been for their own support as well. My dad famously says that he found many different mothers over the course of his life, and so he really believes in that idea of finding the people who can mother you and nurture you.
Well, and I think about that, and that can be kind of typical in the black community, right? You mentioned the play aunties, and we've always got the play cousins and the play sisters, right? And the family that you kind of create. But in the black family then, because we'll get to your adoption story as well, it is atypical for members of the black community to adopt outside of the family.
Yeah, I think, it's funny because I think we're so often so busy kind of surviving that adoption and some of that opportunity to build family isn't really the one that's the first thing that occurs to us. Often I think in times of crisis, we have stepped in to take care of the people in the neighborhood or take care of people in our own families. I think there's also sometimes a suspicion of the state and just kind of not until recently kind of being ignored by some of the agencies that do adoption. And so I think we've, as a culture, have other ways of kind of taking care of each other's children, looking out for each other. Sometimes it's temporary, you know, for a summer, for a year, or a couple of years, or, you know, for a season. And sometimes it's really to be invested in people's growth and lives and making sure they get their education throughout.
You talk about how you and your wife had to reckon with the trauma that is inherent in any adoption. Yeah. How much of that had you considered when you began the process?
It was really something that was underneath the surface, you know, in terms of thinking about, especially as we were wrestling with ways of adoption, thinking about what it meant, for example, to step in a fostering situation. I really thought about that loss that to me was much more clear. But I didn't really think about it in terms of, you know, reckoning with our own grief, reckoning with a birth family's grief, and really wanting to have a relationship with a birth family means acknowledging what the process of adoption, the impact of that. And then, you know, my child's own grief as well, like the ways that even, you know, in providing a loving, really kind of wide-ranging family, there are ways that she's had to wrestle with the realities of being adopted, and also the pressure of talking to people when she doesn't necessarily want to about adoption as well.
Right. There are a lot of nuances about adoption that many folks aren't aware of unless you've got some sort of relationship or experience with it, as you have. Your daughter is 11 now, and at the end of the book, you say to your daughter that this book is for her.
Yeah.
What do you think this will be like for her to read one day when she's ready?
Well, I'm hoping that some of these stories are familiar to her because she's come with me to book readings, and she was there when I launched the book, you know, in Chicago at Women and Children First. And, you know, she's really, I think, taking in the fact that this is a story that's very personal to us, but it's also a story that speaks to lots of different kinds of people. So I hope that what she feels is just a sense of pride and just a reinforcement of the deep love that we have for her, and the fact that, you know, we went through a lot in order to create our home for her and to sustain that. And
because of your love for her, of course.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Francesca Royster, congrats on the book. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Brandis.
Again, the book is called Choosing Family, a memoir of queer motherhood and Black resistance. You can read an excerpt on our website. Chicago-based artist Dwight White says he was always interested in and excited about art, but growing up in suburban Houston, his focus was on the gridiron. After playing football throughout childhood and in college for Northwestern University, and an on-the-field injury in 2014 revealed he was born with only one kidney. And the young man who had played football his entire life suddenly had to pivot. Since then, White has created a thriving career in the visual arts. In 2020, he added event curation to his roster with a cultural celebration centered around the Juneteenth holiday.
My whole being as an artist is like a trial and error thing. I range from, you know, portraiture all the way to abstraction. It could be pretty fine art all the way to street art. Me painting people a lot of times is because I'm just trying to connect to an emotion. I add a lot of color and different elements and spontaneousness into the pieces because those are based on all other feelings that aren't so literal to the human face. Something I can feel, for me, it was born out of a celebration of multicultural, really like Black creativity to be specifically. When I thought about Juneteenth and during 2020, I saw it not necessarily being celebrated in Chicago. It was more so there was an awareness around Juneteenth and what the holiday was now. But all the activating I saw around it were marches, us kind of like making sure our voices were heard, talking about our struggle, which you have to talk about all those things, right? But the one thing I didn't see a lot of was the celebration of our culture. And so something I can feel was born out of that. Being an artist, thinking about how colorful of a holiday it was back in Houston, Texas, I felt like Chicago deserved that same energy. There's an art gala where people get to show up in high fashion and really, you know, step out, which was, we like doing that out now that we're out of the pandemic, right? There's, you know, day celebrations where we're honoring artists. There's mental health and wellness talks, yoga experiences led by Black men. And like, I mean, how often have you seen 60 Black men out doing yoga together? It's not really common. And I just want people to feel, to be seen, to be heard, and then also to be celebrated. But overall, I just want people to know that, like, I'm trying to serve my community, and I'm going to continue to show up for them. And I want them to show up, you know, for these experiences. And at the end of the day, I mean, find joy in whatever that is for you. For me, it's art.
White has 3 Juneteenth events scheduled for next week. You can find details on all of them on our website. And that's our show for tonight. We leave you with some footage of Friday's Juneteenth flag-raising ceremony in Daley Plaza. Now, for all of us here at Chicago Tonight Black Voices, I'm Brandis Friedman. Stay healthy and safe, and have a good night.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a Chicago personal injury and wrongful death firm that is proud to recognize its 18 attorneys selected for the 2023 Super Lawyers List.